From the outside looking in, Nate Farnham of Mooresville is living a normal life. He's an emergency medical tech in training and an advocate for disadvantaged youth. But dig deeper into Nate's life story and it becomes clear that his life has been anything but normal. Of his 23 years, Nate spent 15 in the foster care system, and then for 2 years after that, he was homeless. Just over a year ago, Nate found a place to call home for the first time since his early childhood.
So growing up, my mom was good. She originally was a truck driver, had a Class A CDL, hazmat endorsement, made very, very good money. Of course, things went downhill. She got into a truck driving accident. Come to find out, she had completely broken her back. And the doctor was surprised that she was even walking around to begin with. Pain management was OxyContin and Oxycodone, two of the most addictive painkillers on the market. Things were fine at first. Eventually, prescribed amount became max. Max prescribed amount didn't do shit, so self-medication it is. Didn't stop my mom from being a good parent. You know, nobody would have known the wiser. I always ate. I always had food in the house. Was never malnourished, nothing. Well, one Saturday morning, May 26th, 2006, just any normal Saturday. Wake up in the morning, go out, make my cereal, head out to the living room, just get ready to start watching the SpongeBob marathon with my mom. Hear a knock on the door. And there's a woman, a dark blue blouse, sports jacket, and 2 state troopers, one on each side of her. Told my mom they were there to take me into DCF Social Services care, and that started my road to hell.
Nate says a neighbor reported his mother's drug use to the Vermont Department of Children and Families, or DCF, and he was placed in the foster care system, which would change his life in ways he never expected.
There's a lot of ways people end up here, but first and foremost, folks, there's a centralized reporting system, our centralized intake. Ultimately, I think there's this misnomer that child welfare, like we're the baby snatchers, we're the ones who come and take kids away from their parents, but ultimately it's a judge who decides.
The foster homes Nate was placed in varied. There were some good moments, with Nate being able to play for his high school football team, but there were awful ones as well. Nate says he sustained physical, mental, and emotional abuse, the worst of which happening when he was just 10 years old.
I remember one time I got back from mentoring, and I think I had a visit with my mom that day. I'm not 100%. This was back in 2008. I wanted to just kind of go in my room, be by myself, play my video games, just isolate for a little while, try to calm down, try to bring myself back to kind of center ground. They were right in the middle of cooking dinner at the time, and they were like, no, you need to come into the kitchen, sit down and eat. I'm like, I'm not hungry. Like, just put it aside, I'll eat it later. Well, they didn't like that. So foster mom came in my room after I went in my room and shut the door. Well, a bunch of words go back and forth. Basically tries to grab me by my arm and start moving me toward the kitchen. And I pull back and I'm like, no, I'm not going out there. Like, it's not happening. During when I pulled my arm away from her, I think either A, she made it think she thought I hit her, or B, I may have made some slight contact when I was pulling away. But she ended up slapping me right across the face. And kind of just tried to give myself some space by pushing her back. And after that, she basically put me on the ground and hit me and slapped me multiple times in the face. And then ended up grabbing me by my hair and dragging me from my room out into the kitchen. That shit hurt. Well, shortly after that, they all went into their rooms and I snuck out my window and left.
By the time Nate was 18 years old, he was facing a tough reality. At this point, he'd already lived in over 30 foster care placements. Suddenly, he found himself without a home.
And then I spent 2.5, 3 years couch surfing, living in my vehicle, being homeless. I would not sleep very well at all during the wintertime because I'd wake up every, 2 hours or so, freezing fucking cold, and have to start my car and let it warm up before I could go back to bed. And by that time, I was pretty much fully awake, so it sucked trying to go to sleep in the winter.
About 1/3 of the American homeless population sleeps on the street or in a vehicle. Often, people who live in cars get parking violations, a number which has doubled in the last 10 years, according to one study.
If that's what you have and if that's your shelter, then there's no law against it. When law enforcement comes in play or when it becomes a problem is when you're on private property. And in reality, especially in Chittenden County, it's hard to find any place to park that's not private property.
Because of Nate's good relationship with law enforcement, he wasn't often ticketed, but there were still many day-to-day difficulties he faced.
And I mean, overall, it wasn't necessarily the greatest, living off of basically fast food or, simple shit that doesn't go bad in a day that I could eat that same day.
While fast food and other cheap options were a part of Nate's diet, he also relied on shelters in the area for food. In Burlington, the Community Resource Center has seen an uptick in use over the last year.
I think ideally there would be one of these for every mile or every ward, say, because when we started out last year, this place was getting 20 visitors per day. This year we're getting 80 to 100 visitors per day.
Nate relied on shelters like this once in a while, but mostly he slept in his car. Now he lives on his own, with help from Vermont's Youth Development Program. Nate's long-standing connection with YDP led to big changes. Lawmakers working on foster care regulations reached out and found Nate Farnham. In 2018, still homeless, Nate stood with Vermont Governor Phil Scott as new safeguards at DCF were signed into law. These days, Nate is active in youth advocacy groups, fighting for improved policies that would help children in the foster care system avoid the worst parts of his experience. But Nate isn't the only one fighting for change. Changes have been made within DCF to help people in the system avoid Nate's path.
I've been the district director for 5.5 years, and in that time, we've implemented transition age meetings for kids who are once you reach the age of 17, we start to have quarterly meetings with your team and who are your people. Try to expand what we call our circles of support with folks like Nate.
There are other changes afoot. In Burlington, the City Council unanimously approved a $3 million plan. Roughly 1/3 of that will go towards making the Community Resource Center, previously only operated in the winter, a year-round option for Burlington's homeless population. In the meantime, there are more immediate concerns, as there isn't a plan for a new location after the lease runs out later this year.
So we have the budget to operate year-round, but I don't know where we'll be operating after April. So that's definitely hanging in limbo right now and something that we're thinking about and hoping the city will organize in a timely manner.
While the state is also pushing for more resources, the general consensus is that not enough help is available. For that matter, Nate is an example of someone who didn't get enough help when he needed it. He tells the story of a friend who witnessed the effects of Nate's never-ending battle with his past.
Unfortunately, a lot of the mental health diagnoses that I have now stem from my time in DCF. There have been times where I'll wake up in the morning and he'll literally look at me and not even ask, but tell me that I had a PTSD break in my sleep or a PTSD nightmare in my sleep. Because he'll just hear me going on and shouting no and just basically going back in time in my sleep to my time in DCF and reliving some of those traumas.
Just outside of downtown Morrisville, Vermont, there's a small shopping center where for years you would find Nate Farnham sleeping in his car. What you wouldn't see is the path that led him to that place, the separation from his family at a young age, and the system that failed him at every turn. And you wouldn't see the apartment just down the road where Nate lives now. Nate Farnham is an exceptional person who survived and fought until he was able to stand on his own 2 feet. And now his goal is no longer to help just himself. It's to change the system that failed him and others who may not be able to find their way out.